Chairman Wicker.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Mr. Sumwalt, the Indonesian Civil Aviation Authority has issued a preliminary report. How long did that take after the crash of Lion Air?
The accident occurred, Senator, on October the 29th, and I believe the preliminary report was issued on November the 27th. So
Okay.
about 30 days.
Do you think we can expect a preliminary report then from Ethiopia within about a month?
I do. Our investigators are very engaged with the Ethiopian government. We're working very closely with them, providing assistance in the development of a draft report, and we do expect it in the very near future.
I assume you're getting all the cooperation you need from the Ethiopian government.
Yes, sir, we are.
From the Indonesian government.
Absolutely.
What do you know about the Lion Air crash that you don't know about Ethiopian Air at this point?
Well, I've read the Lion Air preliminary report that was issued in November. I will say a very ticklish issue is that there's a law, an actual law, 49 U.S.C. 1114, that prohibits anyone from disclosing information concerning a foreign investigation unless that information has been cleared by the host country. So I am not the one to speak about either of those two accidents.
Mr. Scovel, are you going to have a recommendation about that law? Do you have an opinion about that law? Is it a problem?
Conceivably, it might be. Certainly in the desire of the Congress and the administration to foster transparency and determine best route ahead. At this point, I certainly don't have a recommendation for you.
Okay, well, if the witnesses would get back to us on that, we'd appreciate it. You have to have some time to consider that. Now, there was a nose-down input, Mr. Sumwalt. In other words, the pilots experienced the MCAS system kicking in and pushing the nose down. I understand it was some 21 times before the plane eventually crashed. Is that your understanding, sir?
Which accident are you referring to?
Lion Air.
I think that's about right, based on my reading.
Over what period of time would that have been?
I'm not sure, sir.
What should the pilots have done there?
Well, I flew the 737 for 10 years, and I do believe that there is a procedure, at least for the Flintstone version of the 737 I flew, a very old 737. But I do believe that the first thing you would do is oppose that motion by pulling the yoke back, and that should engage a stab brake. Now, apparently, that feature is not on the
Mr. Elwell, what should they have done? What should the pilot have done, based on 21 times the system kicking in, pushing the nose down?
Mr. Chairman, I did not fly the 737, so I can only speak to the airplane, all the different airplanes I flew. But when you have,
I'm actually asking about this aircraft. Do you know? If you don't know, that's fine.
So I'd have to get back to you on the specific. There is a non-normal checklist, an NNC on runways.
It would be helpful for us to know, based on the expertise at this table, what should have occurred in the cockpit based on that nose-down input. Mr. Elwell, then discuss, if you don't mind, the point that Mr. Scovel mentioned and that a lot of us have about the decision made by other countries initially to ground the aircraft. What data they had? Was this just an abundance of caution, or was it based on facts that these agencies had that we didn't have here in the United States? Help us understand the decision there.
Yes, sir. It's a very important question. The FAA, to make a decision to ground a fleet of aircraft, is going to do that on a data-based information that we have to warrant a grounding. I can't speak to the reasoning that the other nations took. I know that in communication with those countries. They, in our request, what data might they have? They did not have any data for us. In fact, there were several countries in communications with us who, after grounding the aircraft, asked us what data we had and what we might suggest for them for ungrounding when the time was right.
Was your decision based on data or just the
Our
fact that
decision was
everybody else
based on-
doing? And what was
based on
that data?
So on about Wednesday morning, mid-morning, we received data that gave us refined flight track. We had initial flight track data Monday that was unreliable, and it was actually, we were not able to interpret it and to create a flight track. That data was refined on Tuesday night into Wednesday by the company that actually produced the data or received the data through their satellite system. And with the help of the NTSB and Boeing, that data was refined to the point where we could have a flight track, a 6-minute flight track of the Ethiopian Air flight. And we found information on the ground that corroborated for us in a briefing on Wednesday morning that the flight track of Ethiopian Airlines was very similar to the flight track of Lion Air. And that data told us that there was very possibly a link between the two flights. And when you have the possibility of a link between two accidents of the same type aircraft, it's prudent to ground them until you find what that link is, mitigate that link. And the important thing to know about using data, we may have been, I think someone said, the last country to ground the aircraft, but the United States and Canada were the first countries to ground the aircraft with data for cause and purpose. And that's important because when you ground a fleet of aircraft for a reason, a definable reason, then you have something by which to unground them when you've mitigated that or you've solved it or you've found that link.
Mr. Chairman, I know we're over, but Mr. Sumwalt seems to be nodding his head. Are you in agreement with the approach that Mr. Elwell has outlined as having been taken by the FAA?
Well, the NTSB was not involved in the grounding decision.
All right.
We supplied data that they could use to make that decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Canwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.